We're the book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
All right, dude. Good morning.
Good morrow, sir. Here we are.
Man. Dude, I'm tired. I just got back from a trip last night.
Okay.
And sorry if my eyes look a little baggy. I am tired. How has your week been, my book friend?
It was good, book friend. As you know, I've been working on game design a lot lately. So I've been play testing. Last night I was play testing for another designer, and I was up far too late for a Thursday, knowing that we're recording this morning. So I woke up, my alarm went off, woke my daughter up, and it's just a whole, here we go. We're off to a good start already.
I am feeling the same way. I think, it's a little bit of a late night for us. And it's funny, I'm sure, well, you might have been later, but like, as young fathers, a late night nowadays is very different from a late night 5 years ago.
Yeah, a late night goes from being like a mild inconvenience or like, does the fun outweigh the cost to like, this is a catastrophe. What have I done to myself and my family?
Yeah. Not only that, but like a late night used to be like 4 or 5 a.m. And a late night now is like, oh my God, dude, it's like 10:30. Oh.
Yeah. Did we make it to 11?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true.
Do you and your wife, this is a totally random tangent, do you and your wife still like just try and make it to midnight on New Year's? Because that's my wife and I's feelings. Just make it to New Year's. We're already in bed, and then we just like kiss and go to sleep.
Yeah, it's like, oh, sweet, we made it. It's another one.
Yeah. Woo!
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, it's so weird. I mean, there are things that will change, but there are things that you also like don't anticipate changing so quickly.
Yes.
Which is, I think, like, it's kind of the opposite of what Clear talks about when he's like, we expect our habit change to happen quickly. But, there's the valley of disappointment. Still love that concept. But, like, it's kind of the opposite with kids where you're like, I didn't realize I'd be making dad sounds this quickly.
Right? Like the,
like
when you sit down.
All of yesterday morning, every time I picked her up, I was like, so much so that I have a video of her crawling around, and she's, like, just grunting. And we're like, what is she doing? She's like crawling and like, and I'm like, she's making daddy sounds.
Oh man, that is fantastic.
It's already, it's pretty good. I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
But dude, my book friend, I am ready for a cascade of habit stacking that creates a fat stack of awesome habits.
Dude, stack it to the ceiling like E40, dude.
Yeah, let's stack those habits so high.
So today we're going to start with chapter 4, The Man Who Didn't Look Right.
Which immediately when I read it, I thought it was going to be some clever little parable about a man who didn't look right.
Dude, I'm so glad you just said that because I felt like an idiot, and that's what I thought it was about too. I was totally thinking like Zoolander vibes, like he couldn't look
like,
right.
Ooh, he only looked left.
And then once I read the story, I was like, why did I think that? Why didn't I think it was just a dude who didn't look well?
That's right. This is why we're book friends.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, I mean, kudos to this dude for listening to his daughter-in-law. I mean, that's the first note that I have about this. Like, sometimes your in-laws will save your life.
That was actually my first disagreement. He never should have done that.
Yeah. The story for our book friends out there, the psychologist tells a story about a young paramedic who is so skilled at identifying the signs of a heart attack that she takes one look at her father-in-law and goes, "You don't look right." And it basically Clear's conclusion about the story is that the human brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly taking in your surroundings and analyzing information it comes across. Really what he's getting at is you're much more than your conscious self. We are constantly underestimating what our brains and our bodies do and how much our brain does automatically without any input from us. I mean, it's just moving constantly to solve problems and identifying patterns. And that, I think, is really what he's getting at here. So the whole point really of this chapter is summed up in a line by Clear on page 62 where he says, "For this reason, we must begin the process of behavior change with awareness."
Yep, I circled that quote as well. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I learned was just shortly before that on page 61 where I hadn't thought about it enough. But it was a good reminder too where you don't need to be aware of the cue for a habit to begin. Because as after we read chapters 2 and 3, I tried to analyze some of my habits and I was looking for the cue and I could not become consciously aware of it. And then so it was good for me to read this and be like, oh yeah, duh. Like sometimes you're not even aware of the cue before you start craving something, right?
Yeah.
I had a clear example of this too, or like a clear example in my life that people might relate to of this non-awareness of a cue before a habit starts is I thought about when you are driving somewhere that you've done that route like a million times, and
yes.
At least I've had the experience where I've maybe driven home from a job that I've had for a while, and then I get home and I'm like, wait,
how'd I get here?
Yeah, like I didn't even
how did that
remember
happen?
Driving here. I was just literally on autopilot, and since nothing crazy happened that stimulated me to like change anything, I was just like automatically going.
Or more significantly, maybe you were dealing with a more complicated problem in your brain while you were driving, which is something that I recently read about in a book on liturgy, which is like the order of services, religious services. This philosopher whose book I was reading tells a very similar story about how a plane reaches its destination 95% of the way by autopilot. Similarly, things like that. Like you have a tense meeting, then you get in your car, you drive home. It could be an hour-long commute. And the whole time you're thinking about the meeting, how things could have gone differently at work, things that you need to deal with when you get home. And before you know it, you're in your driveway and you go, how did that happen? And it's because the author of this other book is writing about it from the perspective of liturgy. Like we have habits or rituals that are so ingrained in our brain that we simply follow them. And he's making the argument of, what that does to us from a religious or a spiritual standpoint in terms of how little input we have into the action that we take. So I thought it was just very interesting. These concepts connected very quickly in my mind when Clear starts talking about this.
Yeah. So then when he points out like how to avoid mistakes in these things, he talks about pointing and calling, and he brings up the example of a Japanese subway where they, excuse me, where they adopted this protocol of pointing and calling out all the safety checks, and their safety numbers, like their numbers of incidents anyways, went way down within a year, and just pointing out and calling all the small things right when they happen. Like, I think the example in the book was they'll literally say doors closing and people all
clear,
all clear, those sorts of things. Signal is green. Yeah. So I thought about that and I said that I should probably do that more. Like I definitely think I need to do that more in my life. And that'll help with my acedia that we talked about last week. Because usually when I fall into that trap of seeing the good and knowing what's good but not doing it, I think to myself, well, I mean, no one else is going to know that I did this besides me, so who cares, right? It's like a bad
Yeah.
one for me is like late night snacking, right? Like I'll be all done for the day, and then I have like that's one of my negative habits I'm trying to get out of in this book, but it's like a comfort thing that I'll be like, well, at least I can like snack and eat some garbage
Yeah.
that I want to enjoy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
and like it's just me because like my wife has gone to bed, my son's in bed. I'm just like up for an hour or two after everyone else is asleep.
yeah.
And it's like,
All men essentially become raccoons when the family's asleep.
yeah,
Like, I'm gonna get into trash now.
yeah, Mm. Yeah.
And that
So
trash is different for all men.
yeah, we got like different trash. But
Some
yeah,
are virtuous raccoons.
yeah.
Some
I
are
think
not.
I think the pointing and calling though is something that I need to work on with myself, um, and just yeah, I think that'll
Yeah.
help me a lot.
I like the point of he makes the point of being like a detached observer. So not praising yourself for doing good, not criticizing yourself for doing bad, but being like, interesting. He has eaten chocolate again.
Yeah,
Like that kind of perspective is actually pretty interesting where you go, huh, I wonder why Jack did that, that's a good question that we could maybe introduce to our habits that removes some of the judgment and helps us not to get into, because another kind of spiral similar to the feedback loop is the shame spiral.
yes.
This is a totally different concept, but it's one that I think about theologically. Like in the Old Testament, there's very much this like, you do wrong, you must pay, then which creates anxiety, which then you pay through, sacrifice or whatever, which then creates freedom and like an over exaggerated arrogance almost to like return to that very same thing more quickly. And it creates this spiral of shame that ultimately makes your bad habits worse.
In a nutshell, why I'm not Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are some of the ideas of like one of the things I was recently reading in a different book, also can't remember it, but it was saying that negative feelings are addictive because they produce more chemical reaction in our body than positive feelings do. So even though we may get a dopamine hit from this positive thing, this negative thing feels just a little bit better, even though it's harmful to us. Just our brains are so active in moments of negativity.
I don't agree with what you just said. I don't think that it feels better. I think it's more memorable.
Yeah, I'll have to look at the like what they were actually saying, scientifically, because I can't remember if it was saying that it's like
I think it releases whatever that chemical is. No, it's not. Is it serotonin? Whatever. Because I've read something similar about this.
yeah,
There's a lot of research on this within education, right? And there's this common concept of, with students, you want to have a 5-to-1 positive interaction, 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction.
right.
Like that's something you want to shoot for because the negative interactions are so much more memorable.
Interesting.
And because they're so much easier to get ingrained, right? And
Yeah.
think about it, at least from my life too. It's like I remember when someone gives me a critique more than someone saying like, "Oh, you did that well. You did that well. You did that well." Like I'll be like, "Well, yeah, I was trying to do that well, right?" But as soon as someone gives me a critique, that's when I'm like, "Oh man, all right." And then I like think about it more, and it affects me more. So I think it's more not that the negative feels good. I think it's that it's more memorable and it sticks with us longer. And that's something that I definitely see from a very young age. It happens, with students, and that's why it's so hard. That's why it's so hard being a father too. I thought about that in this chapter of when my son acts out. I don't want to be super negative with him because I know that's going to be like the super memorable thing. He's not going to remember all the times that I'm saying I love you. You're doing awesome.
Yeah.
So you have to be really really careful with that. But
Yeah.
you have to hear it at some point, So it's another thing that it's tough to balance.
Yeah. It needs to be placed in the right setting. And Clear actually hasn't gotten into punishment at all. We haven't seen this concept, brought up by him. So I'm hoping at some point he does talk about it, because that actually gets a little bit ahead of myself into the next chapter, which I'll talk about some.
Yes.
But anyway, on the pointing and calling, I thought it was so interesting to think of myself as like on a Japanese train platform, like with a little vest and being like, hey, put the cookie down.
Yeah, right.
Just
I'm
like
eating.
that.
I am eating.
Yeah, man, I'm eating again. What am I doing? Did you try this with yourself since we
I
read
have
this?
not had a chance to, because I was on that trip. My week's been kind of crazy, so
Oh, okay.
I
did do it.
this weekend is like I'm resetting and like trying to. I want to. We'll talk about this, but I want to print out some of the things that come up in these two chapters.
Yeah.
That we'll link in the description that you can print out too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, one of mine was, so he actually has a tool. It's on page 65. It's called the Habits Scorecard. And essentially what he advocates for is listing all of your daily habits and then just giving them a score. Are they positive, negative, neutral? And, obviously these things are going to vary depending on who you are. He gives the example of eating peanut butter toast. And he's like, if you're trying to lose weight, the peanut butter toast might not be a good choice. It might be negative. If you are, trying to bulk up, peanut butter toast might be exactly what you need, right? So that could be a positive. But I printed these out and did these, and did a little habit scorecard for myself. And one of the negative habits that I noticed the most is compulsively check phone. I don't know when I do it. The cues are totally hidden to me, like what you talked about, how the cue is like, I can't readily identify what's going to make me pick up my phone. But I tried pointing and calling, like, oh, I'm picking up my phone. And I would just literally say it out loud, like, okay, I'm picking up my phone now. And I'll talk about how I want to address that in the future, but when we get into the next chapter, because we'll talk a little bit about that. But that was something that I found myself very aware of, especially yesterday. All day I was very strict about it, picking up my phone. And I got tired of telling myself how often I was doing that.
That's good. That's
but it didn't stop me. It did not stop me at all.
Like you're like, picking up my phone, still doing it.
Yeah, it's like, geez. Okay. How many? It would have been interesting to tally as I went.
That was
how
going to
many
be my
times did I do
suggestion,
this?
because that's actually, funny enough, that's something that it's a strategy that is common with trying to get negative behaviors and habits out of students, is have them keep a tally of it. And I don't know why I didn't make that connection before, but that's what we do. And when you started saying that, I'm picking it up, like have them tally. Like that's something, it's commonly used for students that blurt, that don't raise their hands. It usually starts with a teacher, depending on the student's age. But once a student is, 4th, 5th grade, if they're still doing it, you'll have them start to tally throughout the day and then set, little goals. But that's something you do, is have them tally. Okay, how many times did you do that today? Yeah. I would keep a tally, dude, and see if you can decrease your tally number by 1 every day or whatever.
Yeah, that would be very interesting, because that is one of the points he makes. He says many of our failures in performance are largely attributable to a lack of self-awareness, which is something, I mean, there's a big, I don't know if it's a learning as much as it is just a consolidation of many, many years of reading things in this chapter in such a succinct way for me. But yeah, I mean, I've been telling people for a long time, self-awareness is key. I think Simone Weil was a writer who said that attention is the only faculty of our soul that gives us access to God. I think that is a deep way of putting this very same thing, which is until we are attentive to something, we will never see the invisible things in our lives.
It's true.
Yeah. So I mean, lots to love here. Did you have any pushback?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So I didn't have a ton of pushback on this, but on his example list of positive and negative habits, what he does is he gives a little minus sign for a negative habit, a plus sign for a positive habit, and an equal sign for a neutral habit, right? And that's his suggestion for how to assess these habits. And so I read through his examples, and one of them said, weigh myself, positive habit. And I just had a hard disagreement with that, but I know it's a small detail.
Yeah.
As I've gotten deeper into my fitness over the years and understanding the mentality and how important mental health is behind that, that was just a small note for me. Is no, I mean, I know that that's not the focus of this book, but weighing yourself is not a positive habit to do every day. Weighing yourself every day is not a positive habit because water weight, your sodium levels affect your weight. It can fluctuate 2 to 3 pounds every single day, no matter how many calories you eat. So it's not a good thing to do that every day. That's something you want to do on more longitudinal fashion. But that was a very small note for me.
I can say, I can speak about that a little bit differently psychologically from just with myself. When I was a young man, I think that was definitely true of me. Weighing every day was not psychologically healthy because I would obsess over it. Now, it's actually a habit that I've picked up as an adult. And I think after maybe the time that I really started getting comfortable with it was after I got engaged to my wife. I just kind of, it no longer had the same sort of hold or grip over my mental state and just became a metric that was important for me to keep an eye on. So I've been in the habit of weighing myself every day, but knowing full well what that can do to me mentally and knowing, not to let it, but also having an eye on the metric keeps it from becoming a bigger problem.
Yeah. I mean,
to my psyche. So I've been through that journey and definitely agree. Weighing yourself every day can be a psychologically damaging thing to do to yourself, especially if you already have good habits in fitness. Don't weigh yourself every day. If you're already a pretty for instance, you have strong workout diet habits. You would just be obsessing over marginal ticks.
Dude, talk
up and
about
down.
1%. I mean, it's there was a point a couple summers ago where I was doing that and I was trying to I don't know, I went full bodybuilder mode to see, how big I could get, how shredded I could get. And yeah, it was not good mentally for me. And yeah, talking about marginal gains. I was going to I was testing every day to see if I lost 0.01% of body fat in the previous day.
Yes.
That's why I think it's such a bad.
Yes.
I agree with you that if you can get to the point where you are looking at it differently and have a different frame, but I just don't think that it's not a good thing to start that habit with that. Now what I do that's I think a lot healthier is just weigh myself every Sunday morning. Every Sunday morning, just make sure I'm, in the right range or trending downward if I need to be trending downward, which I don't need to be anymore. But that's the thing because what I would end up getting into is the shame cycle like we talked about before.
Yeah.
Where it's oh my God, I didn't lose 1/100th of a body fat percentage today.
Yeah.
Why do I even do any of this? And then I'd eat a scoop of peanut butter or something and totally throw it off anyway. So it's
totally
vicious cycle.
It has helped in the young parent realm for me too, because man, I'm just so I have no workout rhythms right now. So for me, it's all diet. Diet's the only handhold I have for weight control or fitness. So for me, weighing myself daily, I step on that scale and I realize I might have had a little too much pasta last night. And then I just, it's a check down for me to be okay, Jack, healthy decisions today. You got this. You can do it. And so for me, it's been a positive over the last, couple years. But for most of my life, it was not. If I said daily weighing, that would have been the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, that actually is maybe a good point is he asks us to do this self-assessment of our own habits. And here's the problem I ran into when I was doing this. Here's maybe my pushback and maybe where I just need some more coaching. Maybe he'll provide it as the book goes on. But here's the thing, daily habits. I put about 6 of them on here with question marks because I'm like, is this a daily habit? I don't know. I mean, I kind of think I do it all the time, but maybe I don't. The other thing is, does this qualify as a habit? And this was my biggest problem was I live a very like interdependent life with my family, you know, so doing things for my daughter are habitual, but they're also like chores, you know, and I don't know. And sometimes my wife picks them up. Sometimes I do them. But, and there are cues, right? Like she cries, check, change diaper, right? You know, it's like, I might do that. I might not do that. I might know that she's crying for some other reason. But I just was kind of like, well, how do I like, maybe I need to just eliminate those things. So I eliminated everything that had to do with my wife or my daughter. And then I was down to like a very small list. And I think one of the things that was challenging was I was starting to think like, I have more habits than this. I just don't know what they are. And then the other part was the positive, negative, neutral.
Yeah.
I had a hard time assessing that for myself because I'm like, you know, make coffee. I don't know. Is it good?
Make coffee, that's an interesting
one. Is it bad?
Within the last month, I've completely cut coffee out because I viewed that as a negative habit because I tend to be hardcore about things, and like it's not like I was even drinking a lot. I was drinking half a cup a day, but I was just like, I don't want to be reliant on caffeine to get me started on the day. So I want to cut this out again because that's something that I didn't drink coffee until Jack knows this. It was kind of a big deal when I had my first cup of coffee. Do you remember that night? Because I know Kyle made it for me. So basically, I didn't.
Oh yeah,
that's
right.
I didn't have a cup of coffee until I was 21 or 22 and in my master's program. So like I had made it through, you know, high school, college, all of that, 2 degrees already, never drinking coffee. Not that I didn't have caffeine, because trust me, we were drinking Baja Blast. But I had never had coffee, right? And then all of a sudden in my master's, it became a habit of like, the master's was where I got crushed because I was in student teaching and all the classes, right? And the coffee helped me deal with that on a daily basis in that intense year. And so then it became a point of, well, I wanted to stop drinking with all the sugar and milk and stuff. And so I cut that out, started drinking coffee black. But then I got used to that, and then I got up to a point about 2 summers ago. This is about the same time that I was doing the bodybuilding stuff and like trying to get myself jacked. Where I was drinking like 4 or 5 cups every morning. Like it was so dumb. 4 or 5 cups to do. It was the middle of the pandemic to do nothing. Like 4 or 5 cups to go work out and then teach from my desk all day remotely.
Because here's the thing that I know about my coffee. It initiates a negative behavior cascade.
Yes.
Like making coffee is great. And that first cup, so important. But drinking the whole pot, not good for my heart, man.
Right.
It's just not. Like that's the thing. Like some of these habits are like that.
And I got to the point where I was like, dude, I got through the last school year with all the stress of remote teaching and everything. And I think that was part of the reason. You know, it was like a stress response for me. Yeah. And then we got to summer and I was like, okay, I have, you know, a solid week here where I can deal with this. Yeah. And I completely cut it out. And I literally was like a meth addict. I had caffeine withdrawal. I was shaking. I had cold sweats.
Whoa.
It was bad.
Jeez.
And that's when I knew it was like, okay, I'm glad I did that because I needed to get rid of that. So then I slowly reintroduced and I was just a half a cup or whatever. And then like I noticed just like a month ago that like I missed it on a day and I had a really bad headache even though it was only half a cup. So I was like, no, caffeine, you're not going to get me again. And so I've completely cut it out again. So it's I don't know. I think that points to, that's one of those vicious cycles that has happened in my life. And
Yeah,
trying to figure out, is a habit positive or negative or neutral? I think that's, again, to bring it back to where we were trying to go with this, that is something that needs to be addressed in this book because, like Jack said, if I'm writing down my list, that was something I struggled with too. I didn't write that down, but I should have. Like, what is a positive habit? What is a negative habit? What is a neutral habit? That's
yeah.
very hard to decipher on your own.
He does give a little bit of guidance for that when he
A little
says
bit.
if you're still having trouble determining how to rate a particular habit, here's a question I like to use. Does this behavior help me become the type of person I wish to be? Does this habit cast a vote for or against my desired identity? Good question. Definitely need to start there with your desired identity.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good litmus test. The challenge is just there are some things that are inherently bad. Like here's one that has really changed in the public perception over the last 50 years. Smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much like everybody knows smoking cigarettes is bad for you. Like doctors, when I was shadowing for a doctor, because I did that for a while, but the first question he would ask everybody is, are you a smoker and can you stop? Like that was just the lead-in question. And I thought, interesting. And like for every person I know who smokes cigarettes, they all say either I want to quit, I've tried to quit, I keep trying to quit, or like I know it's bad, look at me, I'm filthy, like that's just like something that we could probably all write that down and put a negative, but I would venture a guess that someone would say like, have my morning cigarette plus, and definitely if you would have asked people in the 50s, that would be like, that's how you start the day, that's how you break,
relax.
that's how you take a break from work.
Exactly,
that's what you
yeah.
do when you're hanging out with your friends. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
So like, I think the phone, for instance, is one that I thought was interesting. He put, check my phone negative, just like that's a negative. I'm so tempted to say it's neutral, but I know that most of the time it's negative.
That's one that I would say, and maybe he gets more into this, and as you dive deeper into the self-awareness and the habits, you can address this. But something that I've always set with my goals in the past, anyway, and in my habits, is a quantitative aspect, right? So like that's why I mentioned the tally, right? Because then you have something where if you're making progress and what a healthy amount is, because it's also just highly unrealistic to think that you're not going to check your phone throughout the day.
Right.
We all
Yeah.
have too many things going on and too many things that are attached to the phone, that happen in the phone, that you have to check it. Because it is your lifeline to bills, any sort of like emergencies that might happen or things that come up, especially with us as kids. Like, dude, if something happens at daycare, I need to be able to check my phone, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing for me is I get contacted for my job as a pastor through many different media. People will reach out to me through Discord, through Facebook Messenger, through Instagram, and some of those are just, hey, what's up? Some of those are professional inquiries. Some of those are serious issues. And that's just that's where people know I am,
Yeah.
So checking on those things is important. It's just the frequency and the amount of time spent there. So one of the things I was thinking about this daily habits checklist, right? We'll put up the link, but was just, I need to put not just like make coffee, but like second cup, third cup, fourth cup, fifth cup, and try to identify, okay, that second cup, maybe the first cup is positive, the second cup also positive, the third cup neutral, the fourth cup bad, fifth cup bad, sixth cup bad. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Or to go back to the phone quickly, you could, instead of making it a positive tally, make it a negative tally. Or what I mean by that is like count the hours that you don't check your phone. and try and build those up so it reframes it a little more positively.
Yeah.
But either way, I think James Clear is going to dive into this a lot more, so we should probably move
Yeah.
on. What do you think?
Yeah, let's talk about habit stacking.
Okay.
Making those fat stacks of habits.
Yeah, so this is chapter 5, the best way to start a new habit.
All right. Weston, my book friend, tell me what you learned here.
My first note was on page 70 when he talks about implementation intention. And he says that a good way to frame this is like a sentence stem, or whatever, in educator language, a sentence stem. When situation X arises, I will perform response Y. And I said, this is the first concrete thing that I can adapt to my classroom pretty easily and change into kid-friendly language. I want to use this as perhaps, I can frame it for my kids as when blank happens, I will blank. And I will try and implement that. That might be a change I add to our weekly logs that we have. So,
Yes.
And then I said right after that, because then he does another one. I also liked, I will behavior at time in location.
Yeah.
So I said I might try both of those and see which ones my students enjoy, or give them the option to use either one, because students always like options.
Could you give an education-related example for that? Like, where do you see that applying?
I see that applying to applying a mathematic algorithm, right? So when I get into this situation, when I see this word, I will multiply. Or when I see two sides and the word perimeter, right? I will add multiply by 2 if it's a thing or whatever. Like that sort of thing where it's like I can help them make those make some of those concepts automatic with I see this, I do this, or just being able to
or the thing that
immediately
came to mind for me, because I think back to my elementary school days, and it was like the end of the day bell rang or the lunch bell rang, and it was like, it's time to leave, and kids would freak out, and the teachers were always like, hey, knock it off, you need to finish your work or whatever. And I think that's such a helpful, I will sit and clean my desk at the end of the day, or when the final bell rings in my desk, in my chair.
Yeah.
That's a simple cue that's okay, focus your attention here.
Yeah. I was also thinking about using that with my cleaning teams. So the way that something I do in my classroom is every student has a unique responsibility within the classroom. Sometimes they're cleaning, sometimes they're I basically have 8 teams, and they need to be teams in case someone's absent throughout the day or whatever. But there's cleaning claws and distributors. They pass out papers, pass out supplies, things like that. Cleaning claws have a lot of different responsibilities. The lunch bunch is in charge of getting the lunch bin back and forth from lunch. I have my door corps. It's a group of students that are in charge of turning off the lights, closing the door, turning off all of our screens as we leave, and then when we come back in, they open the door, hold the door open for anyone if anyways, I'm getting into the details here. Point being, I have a lot of each kid has a specific responsibility, and then every month or so they apply for a new job and they get together with their new team and decide how they're splitting up those responsibilities or how they're rotating.
They submit a resume and a cover letter.
They do. I have an application.
Oh, wow.
It's not super in depth, but it's a little half sheet where they have to apply and tell me why they think they're good at that job or why they want that job. And
nice.
then after they get together with their teams, they have to submit their plan to me of how they're going to act on it and who's going to do what, when are they going to rotate, things like that. So I definitely have a lot of those things in place with my students in terms of they need to build these habits. So I think that's something that I could just add on top of or layer in with the with those plans that they have. I could maybe have a little bit more structure to that. When blank happens, I will do this for my team. When the lunch bell rings, I will bring the lunch bucket back. Things like that. So that's kind of I'm thinking of those kind of applications, the math applications. a really simple one that is going to help a ton of kids. That I just have never had them specifically write out like this, so I think it might help for some of them, is when I see a new word in a book, I will write it down in my glossary, because there's a ton of research behind students that read and gather new vocabulary are the ones that are going to be successful. And it starts at a very young age. Like, you need to make sure, for all our new parents and any parents out there, not even new, read with your kids every day. Please, for their sake, read with them every day. They need to be exposed to about 10,000 words by the time 10,000 different words by the time they're in kindergarten. Please, expose them to different words. And don't baby talk them. Talk to them as adults. They are people. To get on my little soapbox as an educator.
Yeah, for sure.
Please talk to your kids like adults. Like they're regular people, because they are.
Yeah, I think that was a habit that I was reintroduced to, and this is something that was kind of interesting to me, was when I took Intro to Philosophy in college. I remember we were reading about the teleological argument, and the first line of it is, I stumbled upon a heath, and or I was wandering about on the heath, and our professor stopped us like four words into it and was like, "What is a heath?" And everybody in the class was like, "Uh-oh." I don't know. It's like, it's a grassy hill. Did nobody, you just read it and just thought, oh, I don't need to know what this is. We're all just kind of like shamed into picking up our dictionaries.
But dude, that's
good,
that's what
good
so
lesson.
many students do, right? So many students, because it's this whole idea of, well, no one else stopped, so I don't want to be the one to stop everyone and be like, what does that mean? Because I don't want to be embarrassed, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. So, big learning for me in this best way to start a new habit. What is his name? French philosopher Denis Diderot, who invented the encyclopedia. He was given $150,000 in today's money to give his books to Catherine the Great. And I highlighted this note and said, I need a job like that.
Well, not
Catherine
only that,
the
but
Great.
he talks about afterwards, she paid him to do that, and then she gave him an annual salary to keep the library, right?
Yeah, right. Like, oh, I'm going to buy all of your books, but you keep them and give them to me when I need them.
Yeah, and you're my librarian, so I'll pay you to do that. Yeah.
Sometimes I read these stories from the Enlightenment, and I'm like, dude, if you could read back then, your life was just made. Like, it's insane. And some of the things that these wealthy patrons did for people, it makes me think, though, about, like, Patreon is kind of like a good like patron sort of thing, where it's like, yeah, I guess we do kind of have that. We have like influencers and YouTubers and stuff, but it's few and far between. It's not happening for everybody.
Well, it's not as exclusive.
But anyway, I just thought that was funny. But the point that my thing was, when X, I will Y. For me, it was before he even got to this, I was like, when I buy stuff on Amazon, I will slap myself. Like, and then I read about this and I was like, oh my goodness, there's a name for my problem.
Oh man.
Over shopping.
Yeah.
The Diderot effect. I have a disease, really.
I don't think, if you have a disease, then humanity as a whole has a disease. So.
Yeah, right. I'm not as bad as I could be, for sure. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting piece. But here's a learning and a helpful one, and this is what habit stacking really is. B.J. Fogg. He talks about him on page 72. My favorite approach is one I learned from Stanford professor B.J. Fogg, and it's a strategy referred to as habit stacking. I love B.J. Fogg. I have been watching this guy, and I read his book Tiny Changes years ago. And so when James Clear mentioned him, I was like, yes, the habit guy. But what B.J. Fogg did is he taught himself to do 100 push-ups a day by doing one push-up every day after he brushed his teeth. So he said, after I brush my teeth, something guaranteed to happen, I will do one push-up. He slowly increased that to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. To eventually, he was brushing his teeth twice a day, doing 50 push-ups in the morning, 50 push-ups at night. He's doing 100 push-ups a day, just brushing his teeth. This is how habit stacking works. It's cue, craving, response, reward, which builds a habit. And then you use that habit to feed another habit, to feed another habit, to feed another habit. So after I do this established habit, then I do this established habit. After I brush my teeth, I do my push-ups. After I do my push-ups, I meditate. After I meditate, I drink my morning coffee. After I drink my morning coffee, I review my to-do list. After I review my to-do list, I check my email, and so and so. So you have a cascade of habits that carries you through your morning or your day.
Did you try and do that as well this week? Because like I said, I didn't have a chance to do this, but that's something I want to do on Sunday, is create my habit stacking chart of what I normally do and see what I need to like change.
Yeah. So for me, I started this off with just one very, very simple thing that I want to do. I started off with something very simple that I want to do as a habit. I said, and habit stacking starts with this one. There's this printout, and it's at jamesclear.com, but we'll post links to it as well in the show notes. But it just says, after blank current habit, I will blank do new habit. And the idea is you just create chains of this. I will, or after blank, I will blank. For me, I said, after I sit at my desk, I will check my to-do list. Now, I don't know how well this is going to work, but my idea is that to create a productivity chain based on this habit. One of the things that I wanted to do, and I think will be a really important, I have a couple of habits, but one thing that I really want to implement for myself is creating a weekly to-do list at the end of the week. So Sunday night after, this is when situation X arises, I will do this at this location. What I'm telling myself and what I'm going to try to do and implement is after my daughter goes to bed on Sunday night, I will make a to-do list in the living room. Like, I have a space in my house. I'll go out there. I'll write my to-do list for the week. Then I will get into that as I start my week. Because what I've been finding is my work just gets I just get totally distracted. And a huge part of it, one of the biggest problems, is my phone. It just constantly interrupts me. I have a bad habit with it in that I check it far too frequently. I check my phone, I drink cups of coffee, I think as a stress response. And I'm trying to identify where those habits come from and how to maybe nip some of those in the bud so that I can just continue on with productivity. So I think one of the things that will get me started is, I have a morning sort of cascade of habits already. I brush my teeth, I have my coffee, I make my breakfast, but then sit down at my desk. After I sit down at my desk, the first thing I want to do is check my to-do list, not check my phone. We'll see how it works.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm excited to see how it goes for you. I think that's something that I don't necessarily have to worry about as much, and that's probably why I have such a strong foundation in this. Because I agree with you, I have a very strong morning routine. I just need to I just want to write it out and see what the actual habit stacks are. But then dude, my job as a school teacher, every minute is decided already. Every minute from 8:35 in the morning until 3:40 p.m. every single day is scheduled precisely. So I don't have to worry about, and I guess I also take my job seriously, so I don't check my phone throughout the day. So normally I'm only checking my phone at my lunch break, which I don't always get, and then after school's over anyway. So I have pretty strong habits with the phone on that, but I think that's largely just due to my occupation. Mm-hmm. And something that I have been making stronger is my nighttime routine after my son goes to bed. Mm-hmm. I do want to give myself the freedom though from 4:30 once I get home with my son and my wife to his bedtime. I I'm trying to keep that free because we also need freedom in our life too. And like, he's going to he's going to start T-ball here in a month. And there's going to be different events just as a dad, So that was actually something that I talked about here on page 74. I said I like the idea of habit stacking more, and I do that more already due to time and location constraints. As a young father, my life is not always predictable enough to always do the same thing at the same time, so I have naturally habit stacked. And I think that approach, like the habit stacking approach, seems more manageable and practical for the majority of people because, especially as we've seen through this pandemic, like the only thing in life that is guaranteed is change. The only constant in life is change.
That is one of my big critiques, actually, of Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg's book, and approach. And maybe one of my critiques of Clear, too, we'll have to see how he develops some of these concepts and stuff, is like, man, living your life. He talks about living a goalless life is freedom, right? Because the goals are constraining and they squeeze us. But living a habit-driven life can be even more constraining if you become obsessive over it.
Right.
And I printed out one of his other resources, and like just looking at this gave me like a stress thing. It's called this habit tracker template. And we won't get there until chapter 16. But it's like, I think it's meant to be a diagnostic. I didn't even read it, so
yeah, we'll get
there eventually.
Chapter 16, yeah, we'll get there.
But it instantly like induced anxiety in me, where I'm like, this is more complicated than any spreadsheet I ever use at my job, or like this is more complicated than any of my strategic plans. Like, if this is how I managed my day, I would be a mess.
Right.
We need to give ourselves some grace in this stuff too.
Yes.
And like you said, have some freedom. Like, it feels good to have these like, and this is a trend in like productivity hackers, that it's like, oh, you just have to like dial this in and like follow this formula and that's how you earn success or whatever. And it feels kind of interesting, especially like maybe motivating for men to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to be a soldier for my own self, right? I'm going to be like a Spartan or a Stoic or whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, but also like you're a human being, and like your primary job is to be, your primary, like,
you're a human being, not a human doing.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly the point. Like, you got to create these habit stacks with a grain of salt. And a big grain of salt there is like, your habits could get interrupted at any moment.
Yes.
And then what do you do? Like,
exactly.
One of the things I was thinking about is like, I was thinking about this nice sort of Zen picture that he paints of like brushing his teeth, meditating, making coffee. And I'm like, what if you get an important phone call in the middle of this? Like, do you have the space for that? Do you like set your phone aside and like you're totally unavailable? I
was thinking more things out of your control, because I know like with my job, I've had to learn over the years, like, dude, I don't respond to students or parents after the school day, right? Like, I will, from, like I said, 8:35 to 3:40, I am all in. Outside of those times, I am all out. I am doing family things, doing things for myself, because you get, like you said, obsessed with it and it tears you down. But where I was going with this was I was thinking more things out of control. Like, something that happens frequently at my house, in my area with the weather, is a power outage. Oh no, what would happen if, like, what do I do in my workout schedule if I'm on my treadmill and the power goes out? Oh no, my habit stack just totally got messed up. Like, what am I going to do? So, or I am in the flow of my day, and this has definitely happened. For all the young parents out there, this was something I was not prepared for. So hopefully you hear this and think about this. I have taken more sick days, more half sick days over the last 3 years with my son since he's been born than I ever did. Like, I was one of those guys, I had never taken a sick day until paternity leave. And you will get calls in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden you have to go pick your child up, from daycare because they threw up or they're running a fever now or whatever it is, right? So as a teacher, I'm like, well, like, yes, we have lesson plans, but I don't have them like printed out or necessarily easy to give to someone else, easily understandable to
Right.
someone
Yeah.
else all the time in an instant. So then it's like, well, okay, like the rest of the day is shot and I have to adjust and you have to pivot and you have to be able to do that. So I think that's why it's difficult to create these habit stacks specifically tied to a time and location. I think it's
Right.
more
Yeah.
about like when this happens, I will do this. When this
Yeah.
happens, I will do this.
And to navigate, like, I think one of the keys here might be the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the easy thing is like, let's not focus on making a habit stack that carries us from 6 a.m. to midnight. Like
Right.
let's build a habit stack that like helps us get started with our day, helps us get into it. Like for me, I'm the self-paced worker. I don't like it, in some ways, like that's both a freedom and a curse, right? Like I don't have a boss or bell schedule or whatever. Like I have to
The bells, dude.
completely pace myself, you know, which means I have to develop a stack that gets me in and out of that workflow, you know, like those kind of things,
Well, and
but without
to your
being
point,
prescriptive.
to your point,
Yeah.
I think that more adults are your way now. I don't think that.
Yeah.
I think I am the old school, and I think I don't know
Yeah.
if school is going to change, but like I don't. I think I'm in the minority in that where I have very very specific schedule. I think more people are going to relate to you
Yeah.
and having more freedom
Yep.
throughout their day and having to schedule themselves.
Yeah. Like one of my habits that I thought about building, like one of the statements I thought was after I finish my work for the day, I will X. And I can't decide what it is, but there needs to be some sort of switch, I think, that says like, okay, my work is done. What am I going to do to signal to myself like, you're done now. You know, you can step away. But I think that might be a helpful habit to sort of build because
You know what I do?
what do you do?
Because it's kind of like satisfying and I don't know, it's just a satisfying thing I do. When I am done at school, I emphatically close my laptop. Like I don't just like close. I'm like done, right? And like that's like my signal to like, all right, now I'm getting up, now I'm leaving, and like on to the next part. So that's been something that I implemented.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
implemented during remote teaching where I was like, okay, at what point am I going to be done? I'm done. Like,
Yeah, I like that. That's a very, like, those are the kind of simple,
yeah,
and I think that that's the intention too, to give both Clear and BJ Fogg a little bit of, like, credit here. This is pushback I have against the concept, not against their teaching of it. I think they teach it pretty well. I think the one of the things that isn't emphasized is how important it is to be extremely small
yes.
with these things.
And well,
Yeah.
I mean, James Clear does say to be very, very precise, and he does talk about
Yeah,
an
he does.
example where he has some ambiguity and he eliminates all ambiguity. But
Right.
but
Yeah.
the hard part about that is that when you eliminate ambiguity, you can also like you can either delete things and make it a little more vague, right? But then to make it less ambiguous, sometimes you have to add a lot of details, which then takes away from the keeping it simple stupid. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
definitely
also-
something that's hard to balance.
Also, to your point, it doesn't take into account of flexibility because he talks about doing push-ups after lunch, or is it before? I think it's after.
What happens if you slip and break your arm?
Yeah. Or like the thing is like, what if you're working in a different location?
Yeah.
You're not at your desk, you're on your couch or something, you know. Maybe that's part of his earlier habit stack. I will move to my desk and put my computer and then I will start working. After I put my computer on my desk, I will work.
I do think that there is validity to having specific locations for things.
Yeah.
For sure. Like this
Yeah.
is the space that I work. This is the space that I do this.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a good point.
it's not gonna help me to try and cook a 4-course meal in my bathroom. You know,
Yeah.
got to do
Yeah,
that
right.
at the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, and that's all habitual too. Like
Yeah.
what we do in certain locations is habit formed. And like there are studies about like what's happening with our spines because of how we, not the fact that we're looking at our phones, but where and how we look at our phones. Yep, exactly.
Dude, that was a big reason that I noticed that, because when I got my treadmill in my garage, I didn't have a screen up there, and I was just so mind-numbingly bored that I wanted to do something. So I started, I wanted to learn, and I started watching YouTube videos on my phone, but because even though they were still like on the treadmill, I was like walking like this. And I noticed within a few weeks my neck was just like really hurting. And so then I invested in a screen that I put higher up. So when I'm walking, my neck is like neutral now.
Yeah.
And that's been like that was just something you notice really quick. But yeah, I totally agree with that, because there's so much just...
Nice. Yeah.
He mentions the Pavlovian thing, but he doesn't reference that. But anyways, he says, but like a dog salivating at a bell, maybe you start to get antsy around the time of day you normally work out. And I said, abso-freaking-lutely. Like, these are the things that we want to do with these habits. You want to get to the point where you get pumped up, or at least just, you're looking forward to it, to do that habit or start that habit stack. You want to get to the point where you don't dread it. You want to get to the point where you're looking forward to that. And much in that same vein, I look forward to reading chapters 6 and 7 and talking with you about them.
Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.